This episode contains graphic descriptions of crime scenes which may be disturbing to some listeners.
Today we're revisiting a story we brought you last year about murder victim Marina Ramos. It's a case filled with twists and turns, and a shocking new development. Buckle up for this update on Murder in the Mohave.
This is APB Cold Case. Here's your host, former police chief Mark Spahn.
In the fall of 1989, 28-year-old Marina Ramos left her close-knit family in Bakersfield, California, with her two baby daughters and a man known only as Fernando. They were last seen driving away in a black SUV and were said to be heading toward Ontario, California, to start a better life. It was on December 12, 1989, when Marina's brutalized body was discovered by tourists in the Mohave Desert about 50 miles from Kingman, Arizona. Today, we're bringing you an update about some major breaks in this intriguing and still evolving cold case. You can find updated show notes, including a timeline and a who's who, at apbcoldcase.com. And you can hear all of the details of Marina's disappearance in our original episode, Murder in the Mohave. As you heard in that episode, when Marina's body was discovered in 1989, she had been savagely murdered. She'd been beaten, stabbed, and driven over by a car on the remote desert trail where she was ultimately found. But she had no identification, and since there were no missing persons matching her description, she was buried as a Jane Doe. Then, in 2022, investigator Lori Miller of the Mohave County Sheriff's Office revisited the case and started to review old leads. She ran the fingerprints of her Jane Doe through the FBI's database and got a hit, Maria Ortiz, but it turned out to be a fictitious name. The investigator checked with the arresting agency in Bakersfield, California, and found the shoplifting arrest where Maria Ortiz had listed the name of a family member. When investigator Miller checked with that family member, she learned that her murder victim was in fact Marina Ramos. She finally had an identification. But then came a shocking new discovery for investigator Miller when the family asked about Marina's two babies, Jasmine and Elizabeth. The girls were only 2 months and 14 months old at the time that they were last seen in 1989. But finally in December 2022, 33 years after Marina Ramos was last seen, her two missing daughters were now on the radar of police. Investigator Miller's homicide case expanded into a missing persons investigation. And because family members back in 1989 assumed that Marina had gone off to start a new life, they had no reason to report the girls or Marina as missing. In homicide and missing persons cases, time is the enemy to a detective. But because of significant advances in DNA science, time has actually become a friend to investigators. As the decades passed after Marina's body was found, forensics had evolved to the point where detectives and others could now research family connections using genetic genealogy, comparing open-source DNA databases where people upload their own DNA profiles to locate and identify ancestors and descendants. Law enforcement use those same databases to help identify previously unidentified deceased persons, including homicide victims and missing persons. But it's not always an easy path. It's not necessarily a matter of running information through a computer and getting an instant connection. In this case, investigator Miller had DNA samples from relatives of Marina Ramos, one of the most important from Marina's eldest daughter, who in 1989 was living with other family members when Marina left with her two babies. Those samples could help identify Marina's missing daughters in the event they were ever found. Investigator Lori Miller.
I have to thank Marina's oldest daughter, the one that was raised by the grandma, because she went above and beyond. Every time I needed DNA, she would provide it. The FBI assisted me in tracking her down and got a kit out. And yes, for these past years, I've continued to check the kits on the databases there.
Now, investigator Miller uploaded the eldest daughter Maria's DNA profile into an open-source genealogy database. She waited for the DNA to be processed and then checked back from time to time, waiting to see if perhaps someone out there had uploaded their own DNA in search of family members. It was a long shot, but she hoped that maybe there could be a match to Maria.
It was funny because she did the last kit and they had told me that it would take 6 weeks to get the results. And it'd been about 10 days. And I just, for the heck of it, I'll check my emails and it said your results are in. And then so I went to it and I'm going, here I go. I'm going to get a 200. I'm going to get a 300.
The numbers that investigator Lori Miller's talking about are centimorgans, a number that indicates a confidence score about the relationship between DNA profiles. A 200 to 300 would indicate a second cousin relationship. The higher the number, the higher the confidence of the closeness of a family relationship.
And I clicked on the name and it was like 1964.
A centimorgan match of 1900 would indicate a relationship as close as a half-sibling.
Oh my goodness. I'm sure you've been in those kind of situations. Your heart just starts racing. And I froze. It was like, okay. I think I might have found one of them. And so then I proceeded to get the information and I checked the other databases that are available to me to get more information on her.
So keep in mind that the baby girls missing since 1989 were now in their mid-30s.
And then I looked and this one was 36 and she was right in the age range. And then I looked at her relatives and I saw that there was another female relative who was a year older than her. That was 37. And I'm going, okay, I have 36 and I have 37. So then I called my forensic genetic genealogy friend and I said, I think I might have found him. Can you check for me? So she checked for me and she goes, it's the right family line. Unless Marina had a daughter that nobody knew about, you have found one of them.
This was a huge development. The case began as a Jane Doe homicide in 1989, and it wasn't until 33 years later, in 2022, when Jane Doe was identified as Marina Ramos, which uncovered the fact that Marina's two baby girls had also been missing since 1989. And now, in 2025, DNA had identified those long missing girls. Investigator Miller finally got to make the call, but it was a call like no other she'd ever made in her entire career.
I looked at all the phone numbers. I just started calling phone numbers and they were all disconnected until like the sixth one, I think, and a female picked up. And I've been doing this long enough that when you first call people, it's like, if you need to verify who I am, here's the phone number to call, but this is who I am and this is what I do. And in doing this investigation of Marina Ramos and collecting DNA, you have identified as a possible daughter to her. And she says to me, well, I'm driving right now. Do I need to pull over? And I said, I think you do need to pull over. So she pulled over and I was asking her, are you adopted and what's your backstory? And she said, well, my sister and I were abandoned in a park in 1989. And then you get goosebumps, the hair raises on your arms. And she said, yeah, December of 1989. Well, my homicide victim, we found her in December of 1989. So it's like, oh my goodness. And then I said, who is Melissa? Because I was talking to Tina and she goes, Melissa's my sister. And I go, so you're 36 and she's 37. And she gave me birth dates, obviously, that we were adopted. These were the birth dates that we were given.
Investigator Miller was talking to Marina's baby girl, who grew up as Tina and was born as Jasmine. Her older sister, who was born as Elizabeth, grew up in her adopted home as Melissa. The detective next called the number she had for Melissa, and a man answered.
And again, I identified myself, and he said something to the effect, my wife was wondering if this day would ever come. We proceeded to have this conversation about Marina and my homicide investigation, and I heard a female scream in his background. And I said, is everything okay? And he said, It is. That was my wife. She was listening in on the conversation.
Melissa remembers that phone call.
She tried calling me a few times, but I don't really answer random numbers until she called my husband. And I was like, that's the same number that's been trying to get a hold of me. So it must be important. And I just let him take over. I knew as soon as she said a murder, I had a feeling it had to do with my parents, something to do with my past. Eventually, this something was going to come up from my sister doing her DNA test. And I had told her that when she said she wanted to do it, which she respectfully did. She let me know she was going to do that.
In the days following that call, Melissa and Investigator Miller would meet in person. Investigator Lori Miller.
When I first approached her, I said, may I give you a hug? Because I feel like I know you. I've been looking for you for years. And she was very accommodating.
Yeah, she asked to give me a hug, and I was like, I already knew that I wanted to give her a hug. I had to give her my DNA since she is close to me. We just met up, kind of talked, and gave her my DNA then.
Now, while all this was going on, Marina's family was still unaware that the girls were found alive. Marina's sister, Margarita, who still lives in Bakersfield, had become the advocate and point of contact for the family. Finally, Investigator Miller was able to call her with the news.
So I waited about 3 weeks before I notified Margarita. And so when I had confirmation, then I called Margarita and I said, Margarita, I found him. And she said, you're a liar. I mean, Margarita, would I ever call you and try to trick you like that? And I said, no, I found him.
You can hear our interview with Margarita in the original podcast, Murder in the Mohave. Today, Tina and Melissa are learning about their birth mother. Investigator Miller told me that the girls grew up in a family who were looking to adopt a girl, but they took in both girls and raised them together. Now, the girls are processing all of this new information about what happened to their biological mom and learning about new family members.
Since that time, it's been a process of, do I want to meet him? Do I don't want to meet him? She wants to meet him. We were raised by this loving family. She considers them her family, and she's had a good life. And I told her, I totally understand that you don't have to have this big relationship, but at least meet them. And so they can see, who you are, what you look like. You are an extension of a daughter, of a sister, of additional family members. And then you decide after that what your relationship is going to be.
Melissa and Tina were teenagers when they learned they were adopted, and they also learned about the circumstances of how they were found in a public bathroom at a park in Oxnard, California. Melissa told me that for her, she was not motivated to search for her birth parents, thinking that she and her sister had been abandoned by them. But she now knows that her birth mother was also a victim. So there's a lot of emotion surrounding all of this new information.
We first found out we were adopted. I was a senior in high school. My parents had gone through a divorce, and me and my sister were looking through some files and had discovered adoption papers. And in that, reading it, we had came across like Jane Doe, and then another name that we had in foster care that our foster parents had named us, then came to our names that our adopted parents had named us. It was definitely an experience. Actually, I didn't want anything to do with that. I was really upset that that was what had happened and that I was adopted, and kind of tried to ignore it, really. I didn't want to pursue that. I didn't want to find out who those people were. We had read the articles of how we were found, and to me, that was, if someone thought so little of us to leave us in a bathroom, not with authorities, then why should I go and hunt these people down?
It's different because it's made me wonder, because I'm getting two sets of emotions. And it caused me to wonder, did I do the right thing? Only contact I ever had was with Margarita and that family. And like you said, they want closure. I don't know if I'll ever identify who killed Marina, but at least we know the two girls, young women, are alive.
The shocking but welcome news that the two baby girls, last seen in 1989, are found alive will bring some closure to family members who never gave up on them, including their sister, whose DNA helped to find them.
We definitely want to meet her. We're trying to meet her and our grandma. They're both located in Puerto Rico. So we are working on trying to get in contact with them along with our Aunt Margarita.
Marina's cousin, Esther, was also a point of contact for police in the search for clues over the years, but Esther unfortunately passed away a few years ago, never knowing what happened to the two little girls she loved so much.
How they played a part in what little time I had with all of them. Because I know Esther, I was with her, it sounds like a lot. And from conversations of Margarita, the family only saw me once or twice.
Investigator Miller will never forget the assistance she received from other agencies in her pursuit of not just identifying Marina Ramos, who was murdered in 1989, but in her efforts to locate Marina's two girls. So often, these stories don't end well, and that became apparent as Investigator Miller called a couple agencies to let them know that the long missing girls had finally been identified.
I kept getting condolence. And I go, no, they're alive. The one gentleman I talked to in California said, you don't understand. I don't get this kind of information, this kind of answer. I usually get the exact opposite. So I said, no, they're alive and they're thriving and they're well. That was something that I had to back up. But again, in doing this, because like I said, I have Melissa, who's like, why did you do this to me? I've enjoyed this life. And it made me kind of hesitate, like, did I do the right thing? My intentions have always been to do the right thing, but I don't want to cause anything on my part that hurts her. Whereas I have Tina, who's like, thank you. This is what I've been looking for.
Well, I know Lori has made the comment of, because finding out, who my mom is and some discoveries that maybe aren't as pleasant, she's wondered if she's done the right thing connecting us. And I would have to say to, law enforcement and definitely Lori, like, I definitely don't want her to feel that way, regardless of who you're reconnecting the missing person with. They're still family. And all in all, especially if the people are looking for them, it's all good work. And I know it's hard. And it feels like at the end of the day, sometimes one more day, we didn't find that person, Every day, the effort you put in, it obviously shows. If she hadn't done that one more thing, we wouldn't be here. So I really thank all of you guys for everything that you guys have ever done. It really is a lot. It makes me very emotional. But I fortunately grew up in a very good family, and what had happened is definitely not going to define me. So
they're good young ladies. They have their own children, and it's going to be a whole nother chapter in their life. It's just, how are they going to handle it? Because they have parents, and it sounds like Melissa's really close to her father, but she still has questions about her birth father, which I'm still working on.
As it turns out, the girls have different fathers, and Tina's father, a man named Fernando, is not a suspect in Marina's death, according to Miller. But there's another Fernando, a man who may have also been known as Monico. You can see a police artist sketch of that man in our show notes at apbcoldcase.com. Could this other Fernando have important information about what happened when he was last seen leaving Bakersfield with Marina and her two girls in 1989? Was he with Marina when she was killed? Is he a suspect? Police are still working on those questions. At the same time, Investigator Miller continues putting together other pieces of the puzzle. trying to identify other persons of interest who've recently come into the picture because of the identification of the missing and now found girls.
Now the search continues for Melissa's dad, and upon finding out that they were abandoned in the park in Oxnard, I was able to get a copy of the child abandonment report that revealed that the girls were left in Colonia Park on December 14th. In Oxnard, we found Marina on December 12th in Mohave County. So I was able to give Melissa some closure as to your mother did not abandon you. She had been the victim of a homicide. And the report shows that a female, about 5 foot tall, about 35 years old, wearing a long red skirt and white boots, accompanied by 2 male Hispanics, no further description, seen in a black mini pickup truck, were the ones who carried the kids in and left them in the bathroom in Colonia Park. So now the search goes on for who might these people be.
You might remember from our original episode, a couple of detectives who were expert trackers had provided general suspect information based on footprints and tire impressions at Marina's crime scene in the Mohave Desert. But the descriptions offered about the people who were seen leaving the girls in the park bathroom is too general to make any connection. But there may be certain clues from the location of the park at that time that could help connect the dots.
He said that that was a park, it's off the beaten path, that unless you live in the neighborhood, you wouldn't really know about it. It used to have, from what I've heard, like Section 8 housing, which has been since torn down. So I'm trying to get a little more insight into who actually lived, around that area. And also I've learned too that Oxnard and Bakersfield, that there was some kind of connection because of working in the fields, the farm workers. So I need to gain more information on that. What I don't know is how Oxnard, Bakersfield, and clear over here, how she wound up in Mohave County. I haven't figured that one out yet.
After the girls were found in that park bathroom in 1989, they were adopted and grew up not far away.
From our adoptive family, well, we were half an hour away. So we grew up in Ojai, California. And both my adoptive parents lived in Oxnard. So grandparents lived in Oxnard. So we were there all the time. Okay. So that part of Oxnard was not a very good part of Oxnard.
Investigator Miller told me how rapidly things unfolded for her once she got the identification of the girls.
Who would have ever thought a case from 1989 where essentially you had no evidence at all, no cameras, no witnesses, just this vast open desert, and that we would have at least gotten to this point. And I've said it numerous times on various interviews, deep in my heart, I didn't think they were victims of homicide because there was no indication that there were little girls out there. But who would have thought that this would have taken place after all these years? I'll never see it again in my career.
Investigator Miller continues her work on Marina's murder case, and she's hoping to turn up new leads now that she knows the circumstances of when and where the girls had been abandoned. And of course, none of this would have happened without first making the ID of the girls' mother, Marina. Investigator Miller is still working to find out more. Who is the other Fernando with the dark SUV that Marina left town with? What's the connection between Oxnard and Bakersfield in California and Mohave County in Arizona? Who was the woman and 2 Hispanic men who dropped off the girls in Colonia Park in Oxnard? Investigator Miller believes that someone knows. With any investigation, it can be tough for police to get timely leads from the public. But what about when the case is more than 35 years old? Well, this becomes even more important for people to think back and hopefully help police to reconstruct the dynamics of a neighborhood or a public park that's changed over the decades. And just maybe, people who may have thought something was suspicious will now know how important their memory can be in providing a clue. No matter how insignificant you might think, it could help to bring justice to Marina and her girls.
And that's why I appreciate people like you, because that's the only way that this gets out to people. Like you said, somebody's going to hear this and say, I recall. And that's going to get me that one clue that will, just like the DNA, that will lead to the rest of this intricate puzzle.
The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the FBI are working on a reunification to help Melissa and Tina meet their relatives and learn more about the family. Investigator Miller said the girls are hoping for a small gathering, but if they're willing, Miller said she'd like to be there too. Melissa seems to have made a connection with the detective who made it her mission to find answers. It seems that they have adopted each other in a way.
I would say we stay in contact. We're working on some more DNA stuff together, but she does check in on me here and there. I think it's kind of hard to not talk to each other with how close she feels to me and, how close I feel with how much effort and how much time they've dedicated to this. It just, it's hard to not feel connected to them.
Even though one part of the case is closed, there's still an unsolved murder, and detectives hope that some of the leads brought about by the new information of how Marina Ramos's girls were abandoned might help lead them in the right direction. Thanks to Melissa for sharing her story with us, and to investigator Miller, whose perseverance and determination brought the case to where it is today, and for all that she continues to do in seeking justice for Marina. If you or anyone you know has information about this case, or about Colonia Park in Oxnard around 1989, call the Special Investigations Unit at the Mohave County Sheriff's Office in Arizona at 928-753-0753.
Thanks for listening to APB Cold Case. Tell us about your cold case at apbcoldcase@spawngroup.com. APB Cold Case is an original Spawn Group production.